After months of delays, UN inspectors will travel to Syria to investigate the alleged use of chemical weapons. Some argue the mission won't make any difference to the continuing conflict. Hashim Habara reports.
After months of negotiations, a United Nations team is ready to travel soon to Syria. Their task is to investigate whether chemical weapons were used in the conflict, and if so, determine their types. This is one of the locations the inspectors will visit. Khan al-Assad in Aleppo is now under rebel control. The government accuses the rebels of using sarin nerve gas in March, accusations dismissed by the Syrian opposition, which said it would grant the United Nations investigation team unlimited access to the village. The experts will also visit two other sites which are kept secret for security reasons. But many in Syria doubt the United Nations will make any substantial findings. Most of the alleged chemical weapons attacks took place months ago, which is going to complicate efforts to recover traces of toxins. The opposition accuses the government of using chemical weapons in Aleppo, Idlib, Homs and Damascus, where rebel fighters made military gains. In June, the US said it had conclusive evidence that the Assad regime had used chemical weapons against opposition forces. The US president had warned in the past that the use of chemical weapons would prompt greater US intervention in the conflict. That didn't happen, but the Americans have stepped up military assistance to the rebels ever since. The conflict is now flaring up. The rebels are making gains in the outskirts of the capital and the coastal province of Latakia, President Bashar al Assad's heartland. They're not pinning any hopes on the findings of the United Nations team. For them, the war has claimed many lives and displaced thousands of others, so their fight will continue until Assad is driven out of power. Hashim Habara, Al Jazeera.
Well, joining me now in the studio in Doha is Michael Stephens. Michael's from the Royal United Services Institute. How much access are these inspectors likely to get?
Well, if we look at previous iterations of international inspections, Arab League inspections going around Syria at the beginning of 2012, it would be limited. It would be very controlled with government minders there. I'm not really convinced that they're going to be able to go to all the areas described in this sort of list of chemical weapons attacks, and so I'm a little doubtful that they'll be able to get all the access perhaps that we would need for a comprehensive report.
There had been differences over the scope of the investigation. Have they all been resolved?
Absolutely not, no. I think we all have different goals and aims. It's a very political process. All of these international investigations, the countries that are involved in them, wish to see a result, obviously, which comes closer to their way of thinking, which would then help them perhaps in the Security Council. So those fundamental issues, I mean, it's taken months to resolve this particular debate over when these teams of inspectors would go in. I don't think perhaps that we've really got a comprehensive agreement there.
What about the mandate? Have they got a proper mandate for their investigation? In other words, will they be able to say who was responsible for these attacks?
At the moment, no. They are not able, or they will not be given the remit to discuss or to investigate that type of claim. It will only be the evidence which they have found, which would indicate that there are some chemical weapons that have been used. Unfortunately, that's not really very interesting. We know that they've been used. I mean, the evidence was clear and uncontrovertible. Several governments on both sides, by the way, including the Russians, admitted in private that they had found some evidence of these weapons used. So the fact that we have an international team going in saying, well, chemical weapons has been used, it doesn't really help anything. It doesn't portion blame to any side. We're not able to move forward diplomatically.
You're being very, very objective here, Michael, or very cynical, because what you're basically saying, this doesn't change anything politically or diplomatically.
Well, unfortunately, I think we've moved on from the chemical weapons issue. I think the time in which the chemical weapons question was important was when Obama came up and said this was a red line, it was crossed. We are looking at ways to intervene, to aid the rebels, to provide some kind of support because of these red lines which have been crossed. Well, that action was taken. The US hasn't, it seemed, stepped up in the way that it had promised, so that particular issue is gone. Now, if they find that chemical weapons have been used, what does that mean for Britain, which is paralysed within Parliament? They're not going to get a vote through. The French are stuck. The Europeans with the German position are stuck. And the Americans don't seem to want to be able to sort of ratchet up their military support to the rebels. So even if these issues do come to light that chemical weapons have been used...
What are they going to do with it?
Exactly.
All right, Michael, thank you very much for joining us. Good to see you again. 150,000 people in Sudan